I didn't hear the words at first. I heard the sound, the kind of giggle that usually means spilled juice or a secret cookie. It floated down the hallway like warmth. For half a second, my chest loosened, because in a house that always needed something, laughter felt like proof I was doing okay. I was at the kitchen sink, wrist deep in soapy water, staring at a pile of dishes. The clock above the stove blinked 6:42. My work email had already pinged twice. A load of laundry thumped in the dryer, and the grocery list on the counter looked like a dare. "Mom's surprise," my daughter whispered. My hand froze around a plate. "SHHH," my son hissed, and then both of them laughed again, soft and conspiratorial, the way kids laugh when they think the world can't hear them. My first thought was simple and sweet. They're planning something for me. A card, a drawing, a breakfast disaster with too much syrup. My mind tried to wrap the moment in a bow. It wanted to believe in the version of my life where people noticed how tired I was and decided to be gentle about it. Then the laughter shifted. It got sharper, like a spoon clinking against glass. "She'll have to say yes," my son whispered. I felt it in my ribs before I understood it. "Have to." "That's what Grandma said," my daughter replied, voice bright like this was a game. The sink water suddenly felt too hot. I turned the faucet down, too slowly, as if moving quickly might make the words real. "Grandma already booked it," my son added. "Booked, not bought, not made, booked." My mind flipped through possibilities: vacation, dinner, some family event. There were certain words that lived in my body like alarms. Booked was one of them. Booked meant money. It meant commitment. It meant a decision already made. "Dad said don't tell," my daughter said, and that line landed like a thumb pressed into a bruise. Don't tell, not yet, not until, not because it's special, but because it's easier when I'm surprised, easier to steer me when I'm smiling, easier to make my no look rude. I dried my hands on a dish towel that was already damp, then stopped. My heart was doing that stupid stutter it does when I'm trying to stay calm. In the hallway, my kids were whispering, still buzzing excitement. They didn't sound scared. They sounded thrilled. And that was the cruelest part. Whatever this was, the adults had dressed it up so well the kids thought it was love. I should have walked in. I should have asked, casually, "What are you two talking about?" I should have laughed with them, made it light, pretended it was harmless. But a different part of me, the part that had learned the hard way, stayed still. Because I recognized the shape of the moment even before I could name it. That tight, glittery package. The kind that looks like a gift until you try to open it and realize the ribbon is actually a knot. I leaned my shoulder against the wall, out of sight, and listened like my life depended on it. The kitchen light buzzed overhead, but my stomach had already dropped into something darker. "Is Mom gonna cry?" my son asked. "Happy cry," my daughter said, "because she'll be surprised." Surprised? That word used to mean delight. Now it meant ambush. It meant people deciding for me, then calling it love so I wouldn't fight back. I closed my eyes and took a breath. Warm hallway, giggles, normal evening. And under it, the steady scrape of secrecy. I didn't burst in. I didn't demand answers. I didn't give them the chance to rearrange the story in real time. I just listened, because intuition is the first alarm, and mine had started screaming. In our family, nothing was ever small. Not birthdays, not holidays, not apologies. Everything had to be a moment. If there was a problem, we didn't talk it out in the kitchen like regular people. We wrapped it in balloons and called it a celebration. If someone crossed a line, we didn't name the line. We called it how we do things and expected everyone to smile. I used to think that meant we were close. I used to think big gestures were proof of big love. But big gestures can also be big distractions. A spotlight is a convenient thing when you don't want anyone to look too closely at what's happening in the dark. I was the steady one. I didn't get to be exactly. I became it the way a house becomes a house, slowly by holding weight. I remembered permission slips, balanced the budget, kept track of dentist appointments, and knew which child would melt down if their socks felt wrong. When the fridge made a weird noise, I fixed it. When the kids had a nightmare, I got up. When someone forgot something, it was always okay because I would cover it. That was my role. Reliable, predictable, the person you can build your chaos on. My husband, Mark, was the opposite of me in the way people find charming at first. He could walk into a room and make everyone feel like they were part of something special. He told stories with his hands. He remembered the names of strangers' dogs. He brought coffee home for the neighbors when it snowed. He was warmth and charisma and easy laughter. And he hated conflict like it was a disease. Mark would do almost anything to avoid a hard conversation. He'd joke. He'd change the subject. He promised something vague, we'll figure it out, and hope time did the work he refused to do. When I said, we need to talk, his face would tighten like I was asking him to lift something heavy. His mother, my mother-in-law, Linda, always acted like our family ran on love, when really it ran on her. She wasn't loud about it. She didn't have to be. Linda controlled with sweetness and tradition, with the soft smile that said, I'm doing this for you. She was the kind of woman who could stab you with a compliment and make you thank her for the blade. Families are supposed to do things together, she'd say, whenever I hesitated. It's not about you, honey, it's about all of us. And if I pushed back, even politely, she would look genuinely wounded, like my boundaries were a personal insult. That was her gift. She made no feel like cruelty. The kids loved her. Of course they did. Linda was sugar. Linda was prizes. Linda was secret surprises and whispered plans and little winks across the table. She made them feel grown. She made them feel chosen. And kids, God help them, will follow the person who makes them feel important, even if that person is using them like puppets. That night, as their whispers ran down the hallway, I suddenly saw the pattern in sharp, painful detail. Not just this moment. The whole history of surprises that weren't really surprises at all. Like the anniversary dinner 2 years ago, when Mark insisted we dress up, said he'd made reservations somewhere fancy. I walked into a restaurant full of his relatives, his cousins, his aunt, his mother, and everyone clapped like I'd won something. Linda stood up to give a toast about what a devoted wife I was, how lucky Mark was to have someone so supportive. Then, right there, in front of everyone, she handed me a framed photo of the family and said, "We're so glad you're finally really part of us." Finally. I remember smiling so hard my cheeks hurt because what else could I do? If I corrected her, I'd be the difficult one. If I said, actually, I've been part of this family for 12 years, I'd ruin the moment. And the moment was the point. The moment was always the point. Or last summer, when Linda announced she'd taken care of the kids' week-long camp. She presented it like a miracle, confetti in her voice, excitement in the kids' eyes. I already paid, she said, as if she'd saved us. But she hadn't asked about our schedule or the fact that I'd already requested those days off to visit my sister. When I hesitated, Linda's smile thinned. "Well, I guess if you don't want the kids to have fun," she said softly, like she was disappointed in me as a mother. Mark said, "It's fine, babe, it's already done." Already done. Those words were the rope. And I'd let them loop around my wrists because I didn't want to fight in front of the kids. Because I didn't want to be the villain in a story someone else was narrating. The thing about being the steady one is that people start believing you don't need anything. Or worse, they start believing you don't get a say. Your strength becomes their permission. So when I heard my son say, "She'll have to say yes," it didn't sound like a child's misunderstanding. It sounded like an adult's instruction, translated into kid language. It sounded like Linda. It sounded like Mark trying to keep the peace by offering me up as the sacrifice. That choice didn't feel heroic. It felt small and lonely, standing in my own kitchen while everyone else shared a secret about my life. But I'd learned you can't fight a script you haven't heard. If I wanted to protect my kids from becoming collateral damage, I needed the truth first. I needed to know what the yes was attached to: money, time, our home, my dignity. So I moved through the evening gently, smiling on cue, listening harder than I spoke. When Mark got extra helpful, I noted the timing. When Linda texted hearts, I noted what she avoided saying. Even their excitement had edges, like laughter sharpened into instructions. I walked back to the sink and stared at the dishwater until the bubbles popped. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. I tried to reframe it as love. But my body wouldn't cooperate. My stomach stayed tight. My throat stayed dry. The laughter in the hallway felt less like joy and more like a rehearsal. Because that's what our family did. We rehearsed. We staged. We performed closeness instead of building it. We used tradition like a gavel, love like a leash, and surprise like a weapon. And in that moment, I understood something that made my hands go cold around the towel. Whatever was coming wasn't planned for me. It was planned around me, around my usual compliance, around my usual silence, around the role I'd been playing so long they forgot it was a choice. So I made a new choice, quietly, without drama, without giving anyone the satisfaction of a scene. I did confront. I didn't accuse. I didn't demand. I didn't need the whole plan yet. I needed the first crack. I started watching. I started counting. I started noticing every little detail that didn't belong. The next morning, the house moved like nothing had happened. Cereal bowls, backpack zippers, the dog scratching at the back door. I packed lunches and signed a field trip form with a smile that felt glued on. Inside my chest, though, something had shifted. The laughter from the night before kept replaying like a song I couldn't turn off. She'll have to say yes. Grandma already booked it. Dad said don't tell. If it was really a gift, why did it need secrecy? Why did it need strategy? I pictured my kids' faces if I smiled and nodded, how relief would flood the room. That's what they always bought with my compliance. Quiet. But quiet isn't peace. Quiet is just what happens when one person swallows everything. After I dropped the kids off, I didn't drive straight to work. I sat in the car with my hands on the steering wheel, breathing hard, then did something I almost never did. I drove back home. The driveway was empty except for Mark's car. He worked from home most days, and he'd told me he had calls stacked that morning. Calls stacked. Another phrase that meant don't interrupt. I walked in quietly, keys still in my hand, and the house was too still. From the living room, I could hear his voice, low and smooth, the voice he used when he wanted someone to like him. It carried down the hallway in broken pieces until I stepped closer and caught the words cleanly. No, she doesn't know yet, Mark said. My stomach clenched, so hard I had to grip the wall. He paused, listening, then gave a soft laugh that wasn't funny. Because she'll overthink it, Mom. You know she will. Mom, Linda. I leaned into the hallway corner and held my breath. Mark again, quieter now. If we frame it right, she'll go along. It's easier if it's a surprise. Easier for who? Linda's voice crackled through the speaker, just loud enough that I could hear the tone, not the exact words. She sounded pleased, certain, like a person who already owned the ending. Mark said yes at the dinner, with everyone there. That way it's happy. That way she can't. He stopped, corrected himself. That way she won't make it weird. Make it weird. Translation, say no, ask questions, notice the strings. He paced, footsteps thudding closer, then farther. I handled the kids. They're excited. They think it's for her. It'll be sweet. Sweet. That was what they called it when I was being handed a decision I didn't get to make. Linda's voice rose, and Mark lowered his, like he didn't want the house to hear him betray it. I know it's fast, he said, but you said your lease is up. You said you can't do stairs anymore, and honestly, it makes sense. We have the space. My heart dropped. Your lease is up. You can't do stairs. We have the space. It wasn't a vacation. It wasn't a bracelet. It was my mother-in-law moving in. Mark continued, and each sentence felt like another plank being nailed over my choices. She's going to say yes, Mom. She loves you. She'll understand it's temporary. Temporary. The word people use when they want to move into your life without asking permission. Linda spoke again, and Mark's answer came fast. No, she can't say no in front of the kids and my sisters. That would look terrible. She wouldn't do that. He said it with confidence, like my decency was a lock he'd already picked. I pressed my palm to my mouth, because a sound wanted to come out of me, something between a laugh and a sob. Mark's voice turned practiced. We'll present it as helping her. Like, Mom wants to be closer to the kids. And we'll say the downstairs room is already set up. Already set up. Of course it was. Linda must have said something sharp because Mark sighed. Yes, and the money, listen, I told you. We'll handle it. I'll talk to her after she agrees. After, not before. The plan wasn't just that Linda would move in. The plan was that I'd be trapped into agreeing first, then talked into accepting the cost. Mark's voice softened into the tone he used when he wanted to sound like a good man. She's stressed lately. This could actually help. You'll be around. The kids will have you. And if she has support, maybe she'll stop being so on edge. On edge, that's what they called it when I noticed things. Linda's speaker crackled again, and Mark laughed once, forced. No, she won't leave over something like this. Come on, she's not that kind of person. I felt my face heat with humiliation, like I'd been caught reading my own obituary. I backed away before the hallway swallowed me. My knees were shaking, and I didn't trust my body to stay quiet if I stayed any longer. I slipped into the kitchen and leaned over the counter like I'd been hit. A move-in. A temporary arrangement. A public dinner with witnesses. And my children, the people I would die for, were being trained to sell it to me with smiles. I thought of my daughter's voice. Is Mom gonna cry? Happy cry, because she'll be surprised. My kids weren't conspirators. They were props. The soft part of the trap meant to make me feel cruel if I refused. Because what kind of mother says no when her children are beaming? What kind of wife ruins a family moment? A mother with boundaries, I wanted to answer. A wife with a spine. But I also knew how stories worked in this house. I knew how quickly I could become the villain in a tale I didn't write. I heard Mark's office door open, then close again. His footsteps headed toward the kitchen, and I forced my face into neutral before he appeared. He looked surprised to see me. Hey, he said too brightly. Forgot something. I held my keys up like they explained everything. My laptop charger, I lied. He studied me for half a second, just long enough for me to wonder if he could hear my heartbeat. Then his smile returned, easy, confident. Oh, yeah, it's probably on the counter. I walked past him, slow, and felt the weight of the secret hovering between us. He reached out and brushed my shoulder like affection could erase what he'd said on that call. The touch was warm. The intention behind it was strategy. Everything okay? He asked. The old version of me would have swallowed the fear and said, fine. The old version of me would have started negotiating in her own head. Maybe it will be okay. Maybe it really is temporary. Maybe I'm being dramatic. But standing there, with the taste of betrayal metallic in my mouth, I understood something sharp and simple. This wasn't a surprise. It was a script, a setup, a yes-trap disguised as love. And I didn't even need to know every detail yet to recognize the center of it. They were counting on my silence. They were counting on my kindness. They were counting on the fact that I wouldn't embarrass them in public, even if they were willing to corner me in it. As I walked out of the house, charger in hand, my hands finally stopped shaking, not because I felt safe, but because I felt clear. I stopped asking, what is it? I started asking, who benefits? I did confront Mark. Not that day, not the next. I learned a long time ago that when people are building a story about you, they're waiting for the one reaction that lets them cast you as the problem. Anger would make me unstable. Tears would make me too emotional. Questions would make me paranoid. So I did the only thing they hadn't planned for. I got quiet. Quiet didn't mean passive. Quiet meant precise. I started with information. Mark was careless in the way confident people are careless. He left his phone face up. He synced everything across devices. He believed deep down that I wouldn't look, because good wives don't look. Good wives trust. That assumption was my opening. The first clue came 3 days later. Mark's laptop chimed while he was in the shower, and a notification flashed across the screen. Family dinner, RSVP, yes. Under it, a list of names that made my stomach tighten. His sisters, 2 cousins, an aunt who only showed up when there was drama, and Linda. A Tuesday night dinner. Everyone, in the middle of the week. I clicked nothing. I didn't need to. The subject line was enough. That evening, I tested the air the way you test water before you step in. "So," I said casually while I stirred pasta sauce, "your mom doing okay?" Mark didn't even look up from his phone. "Yeah, why?" "No reason, just checking." He shrugged, the kind that meant, "Please don't add anything hard to my day." "She's fine." People who are fine don't require secret dinners. The next clue arrived on my own phone. A calendar notification popped up that I didn't remember entering. "Dinner, 7:00 p.m., Bistro Marlowe." It wasn't on my calendar. It was on the shared family calendar, one Mark insisted we use because organization helps. Except I hadn't been invited. Not officially. Just a placeholder dropped into my life like a weight. Bistro Marlowe wasn't our usual place. It was expensive, loud, and built for performances. Photos, speeches, applause. A stage. I clicked into the event details and felt my throat tighten. Notes. Dress nice. Location. Confirmed. Attendees. A long list of Mark's family. The host line read, Linda. Linda was hosting. For me, without me. Still, I moved through my week like a ghost. I smiled at the kids. I kissed Mark hello. I folded laundry. But behind the normal, I started collecting little pieces of proof the way you gather kindling, quietly, carefully. On Thursday, my daughter came home from school holding a garment bag like it contained a crown. "Grandma let me borrow this for you," she announced, eyes shining. I forced my face into gratitude. "For me." "It's a dress," she whispered like it was sacred. "A pretty one for Mom's surprise dinner." Surprise dinner. The phrase was now official. I unzipped the bag just enough to see deep blue fabric, silky and dramatic. Something Linda would pick, something that said, "Look how put together our family is." "Grandma said you'll look so beautiful," my daughter added. And there it was, slipped between compliments, the expectation, beauty as obedience, looking beautiful as my role in their production. "That's sweet," I said because my daughter's excitement was real. That mattered. Upstairs, I hung the garment bag in the closet and stared at it like it was evidence. It wasn't just a dress. It was a costume. Friday night, Mark left his phone on the coffee table when he stepped outside. The screen lit up with a message preview, and I saw the group name. Mom's surprise party popper. My pulse jumped. It wasn't a family chat. It was a planning committee. I picked up the phone. The chat was a flood of cheerful coercion. Linda's messages sat at the top like orders wrapped in glitter. "Remember, act normal. No one mention moving boxes," Mark wrote. "She's been stressed, so keep it positive," as if my stress were permission to take my choices away. One of his sisters added, "She can't say no in front of the kids, lol." Lol. There it was in black and white. Not a fear, a strategy. I scrolled until I found the proof that made my vision blur. A screenshot of Linda's lease end date, followed by her message. "I'll bring the papers to dinner. Once she agrees, it's done." On Saturday, I found the receipt by accident, except nothing in that week was an accident. It was crumpled in the pocket of Mark's jacket when I went to toss it in the wash. A deposit confirmation for Bistro Marlowe, paid in Linda's name. Under it, a line that made my skin prickle. "Private room reserved." Private room. Not just dinner, an event. An hour later, an email popped up on the family tablet, the one the kids used for homework. Subject: "Welcome to Marlowe menu selections." Linda had replied all with a cheery, "We'll do the set menu, and yes, we'll need space for a small presentation." Presentation. My mouth went dry. They weren't just asking me, they were planning to announce me. I tested the kids, the way you test a door to see if it's locked. "Grandma's excited about Tuesday, huh?" I said, tying my son's shoelaces. He grinned. "Yep, she said it's gonna be the best surprise ever." "What kind of surprise?" I kept my voice light. He shrugged, then repeated, almost word for word. "It's for the family, and you'll love it, and you can't say no because it'll hurt feelings." He didn't know what he'd just confessed. He just knew the line, too. Papers, not a request, papers. I set the phone down exactly where it had been and stared at the wall until my breathing slowed. Something inside me snapped, not loud, not dramatic, just a clean break from the part of me that still hoped this was misunderstanding. Later that night, I asked Mark a question so small it could have been nothing. "Bistro Marlowe," I said while we brushed our teeth. "Didn't they close early on Tuesdays?" He paused, then laughed too quickly. I don't know why." "No reason. I just thought I saw something online." "Oh," he rinsed, avoided my eyes. "Yeah, maybe they changed hours." Vague, slippery. A man answering around the truth. The next day, Linda called me. Her voice was sweet enough to rot teeth. "Hi, honey," she sang. "Just checking on my bobbies. How are my grandkids?" "Good," I said. "Busy." "And you," she pressed. "You sound tired." "I'm fine," I said. A tiny silence. Then, "Well, we're all so proud of you. You do so much." "Proud of you." The praise that always came before the grab. She mentioned nothing about dinner, nothing about moving in. She wanted me unprepared. She wanted the spotlight. When we hung up, my dread finally hardened into clarity. This wasn't love. This was image management. They weren't planning a surprise to honor me. They were planning a surprise to use me, my kindness, my reluctance to make a scene, my devotion to my kids, to secure a yes they couldn't earn honestly. They weren't worried about whether I wanted it. They were worried about whether I'd ruin the photo. That night, I stood in my closet and ran my fingers over the blue dress Linda chose. In the mirror, I looked like myself, tired eyes, hair hastily clipped back, a woman who had spent years making things smooth for everyone else. I whispered the truth out loud, just to hear it in my own voice. "They're building a stage." And then I made the decision that would change the next week of my life. I wasn't going to explode. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to crumble into tears that made them feel powerful. I was going to prepare. The strangest part wasn't that they planned it. The strangest part was how familiar it felt, like my body had been bracing for this kind of thing for years, and I'd just been calling it normal. When I lay in bed that night, Mark's breathing slow beside me, I stared at the ceiling and tried to pinpoint the exact moment my voice started becoming optional in my own life. Not one big betrayal, not one dramatic showdown, just 1,000 tiny moments where my boundaries were treated like suggestions, and my no was treated like something to work around. It's hard to explain to someone who hasn't lived it. On the outside, it looks like love. It sounds like family. It's always wrapped in good intentions. But inside, it feels like being gently pushed backward, inch by inch, until you don't recognize how far you've moved from yourself. The first time I noticed it, I was pregnant with my daughter. I'd had a rough first trimester, nausea that felt like drowning, exhaustion that settled into my bones. I'd asked Mark for one thing: "Please don't tell anyone until I'm ready. I want it to be ours for a little while." He kissed my forehead. He promised. A week later, we walked into Linda's house for Sunday dinner and she screamed, "My baby is having a baby," before I even took my coat off. Balloons dropped from the ceiling, pink and blue, like confetti meant to bury my discomfort. Mark stood there smiling, and everyone clapped, and I felt my stomach turn, not from pregnancy, but from the shock of being exposed. Linda hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. "Oh, honey," she said loudly, for the room, "you look so pale. Are you keeping food down at all? Are you still throwing up every morning?" I remember laughing because everyone else laughed. I remember answering questions I didn't want to answer because the room was watching. My private body became dinner conversation. When we got home, I said softly, "I didn't want that." Mark looked genuinely confused. "But they're happy," he said. Like happiness was the only metric. And Mom already told everyone. What was I supposed to do? He made it sound like the information had slipped out of his hands. Like a secret couldn't be held if someone wanted it badly enough. That was my first lesson. In this family, my comfort came second to their celebration. The second lesson came after my daughter was born, in the early fog of motherhood when days were measured in naps and diapers, and the small, desperate hope of a full night's sleep. I was bleeding and sore and painfully raw, and I told Mark, "No visitors this weekend. Please, I need time." He nodded. He agreed. Sunday afternoon, the doorbell rang. I heard Linda's laugh before I saw her. Mark opened the door like he'd been waiting for her, and suddenly our living room filled with perfume and noise and bags of groceries I didn't ask for. I brought food, Linda announced, like it absolved everything. I told the girls to come too. This is a family moment. I stood there holding my baby, hair greasy, nursing bra unclipped, and I felt my whole body want to disappear. Mark's sisters cooed and reached for my newborn like she was a prize. I tried to hand her back politely, to keep her close, and Linda frowned like I was being rude. "You can't be so possessive," she said, still smiling. "You're going to have to learn to share. Share my baby. Share my postpartum body. Share the tiny space where I was trying to become myself again." That night, after they left, I cried in the bathroom while Mark said, "They just wanted to help." Help. It was always help. Help that arrived like a storm and left me cleaning up afterward. Then there was the school issue, years later, when my son was struggling. His teacher called me and said he was falling behind in reading. She suggested extra support, and I felt that mother panic rise, fear mixed with shame, the crushing feeling that you're failing the person you love most. I told Mark I wanted to keep it private until we had a plan. "He's already sensitive," I said. "I don't want everyone talking about him like he's broken." Mark listened, nodded, kissed my cheek. "Of course." 2 days later, Linda invited us to dinner, and halfway through the meal she said loudly, "So, I hear my grandson can't read. What's going on?" The fork in my hand went still. Mark looked down at his plate. Linda turned to his sisters. Wide-eyed like this was a community concern. "We need to pray about it," she said. "And maybe someone should look into tutors. I can ask my church friends. This is serious." My son's face flushed so fast his ears turned red. He pushed his chair back, muttered, "I'm done," and disappeared into the hallway. I followed him and found him in the bathroom, cheeks wet, arms crossed tight over his chest. "Everyone thinks I'm stupid," he whispered. I wanted to burn the whole house down. Instead, I went back to the table and said, "We're handling it," as calmly as I could, because I could feel Linda waiting for me to crack, waiting for proof that I was dramatic. Linda waved her hand. "Oh, honey, don't be so sensitive. Family should know these things. We're just worried." Worried, like worry gave them rights. In the car afterward, I finally snapped at Mark. "Why would you tell her? Why would you tell anyone?" Mark gripped the steering wheel and said, "I didn't tell her. She asked questions. I didn't want to lie." And there it was again, his fear of discomfort dressed up as morality. He didn't want to lie, but he was fine letting me be blindsided, fine letting our child be humiliated, fine letting Linda run the narrative. My no was never an answer. It was just a speed bump, something they rolled over, then acted surprised when I got hurt. I think the worst moments weren't even the big ones. It was the everyday erosion. It was Mark agreeing with me privately, then going quiet in front of his mother. It was Linda rearranging my kitchen to help, and Mark saying, "She means well." It was my plans changed last minute because someone else had already decided. It was the constant message. Your feelings are inconvenient, your boundaries are negotiable, your voice is optional. And every time I stayed quiet, every time I swallowed it to keep the kids from hearing us argue, every time I smiled so no one could accuse me of being ungrateful, I trained them. I trained them to expect surrender. They learned that if they just moved fast enough, if they just made it public enough, if they just involved enough people, I would fold. Not because I didn't have a spine, because I had a conscience, because I couldn't stand to hurt anyone, especially my children. And they used that. That's why this surprise felt like a knife, not a misunderstanding. It wasn't new. It was the pattern finally bold enough to announce itself. In the dark, I listened to Mark's steady breathing and felt something settle in me. Not rage, not panic, but a kind of grief that was almost clean. This wasn't about a dinner. It wasn't about a dress. It wasn't even about Linda moving in. It was about whether I existed in this family as a person or as a role. It was about whether my voice mattered in my own life. And once you see that, You can't unsee it. By Sunday, the air in our house had changed. Nothing looked different. Same shoes by the door, same half-finished Lego city on the living room rug, same pile of mail I kept meaning to sort. But it felt like someone had moved the furniture in my head. Every laugh sounded rehearsed. Every "how was your day?" had a second meaning underneath it. And the worst part was how normal everyone insisted on being, like they could keep the lie alive by acting casual. Mark turned into the husband I used to brag about. He made coffee before I woke up. He emptied the dishwasher without being asked. He offered to handle homework. He rubbed my shoulders while I cooked dinner and said, "You're amazing, you know that." It should have made me melt. Instead, it made my skin prickle. Because affection is supposed to feel like safety. This felt like choreography, like he was placing soft pillows around a trap so I'd fall quietly. Monday morning, he kissed my forehead and said, "I think we should do something nice this week. You deserve it." My mouth went dry around my toothbrush foam. "Something nice," I echoed. He smiled, bright and confident. "Yeah, just something for you." There it was, the line from the group chat repackaged. For you, as if the word "you" made it mine. I nodded like I believed him and watched his eyes relax. He wanted me calm. Calm meant cooperative. Linda, meanwhile, became a shadow. Not in person. She wasn't hovering in my hallway or dropping by unannounced. She didn't need to. She hovered through texts and calls, through little heart emojis and checking in messages that landed like invisible hands on my back. Monday afternoon. "Hi, honey. What's your favorite dessert these days?" Just curious smiling face with smiling eyes. Monday evening. "Do you still like that blue color? You always look pretty in blue." Tuesday morning. "So excited to see the kids soon. They've been talking about you nonstop." I could almost hear the sweetness hardening around the edges. She was building a mood. She was laying out the emotional carpet she expected me to walk across barefoot and grateful. The kids, poor bobbies, became little assistants. My daughter set the table without being asked. My son hugged me twice in one day, an unusual event in the life of a child who believed affection was embarrassing. "You okay?" I asked him gently when he wrapped his arms around my waist like he was trying to anchor himself. He looked up at me and grinned. "Just love you." I felt my heart break in two directions at once. One half melted because he was my boy. The other half ached because I knew someone had coached him into that moment like a cue. Tuesday night, my daughter sidled up beside me while I folded laundry. She leaned in like she was about to share a secret and said, "Mom." "Yeah, baby." "You have to be happy on surprise night," she whispered. I kept my hands moving over a towel so she wouldn't see them tremble. "Why do you say that?" She shrugged, eyes wide and innocent. "Because Grandma said it's important. She said if you get mad, it'll hurt everyone's feelings." There it was again. My emotions assigned a job. My reaction treated like a responsibility. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "it's not your job to manage other people's feelings." She blinked like she didn't understand the concept. And why would she? She'd grown up watching me do it. I pulled her into my arms and held her a little tighter than usual. "Whatever happens, okay? Whatever grown-ups are doing, you and your brother aren't in trouble. You hear me?" She nodded, but her little face looked confused, like she could sense a storm and didn't know which way to run. After she went to bed, I stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at their doors. The isolation hit hardest at night, not because I was physically alone, I wasn't, but because I was the only one not allowed in on the truth of my own life. They were all sharing a joke that wasn't funny. They were all holding hands around a secret that required my blindfold. That's what coordinated pressure feels like, not a punch, a circle. So I started planning, not the way Linda planned, with menus and guests, but the way you plan when you're trying to survive something without breaking the people you love. First, I made a promise to myself. I would not scream in front of the kids. My children had already been pulled into this against their will. They didn't deserve to watch their parents detonate. They didn't deserve to feel like they caused it. Whatever consequences came, They needed to land on the adults who set the trap, not the children used as bait. Second, I practiced the words I would use. Not speeches were too dramatic. Drama would become their proof that I was overreacting. I needed simple sentences, solid ones, the kind you can't twist. No, I didn't agree to this. I'm not making this decision right now. We can talk privately later. I repeated them in my head while I washed dishes. I whispered them into my pillow after Mark fell asleep. I stood in the bathroom mirror and said them out loud until my voice stopped shaking. Because that was the thing Linda didn't understand about me. I wasn't weak. I was controlled. And control is not the same as helplessness. Third, I decided what I needed practically. If Linda moved in, it would change everything. Privacy, finances, my children's emotional space, my marriage. It wasn't a small ask, it was a restructure of our home. So I wrote down the boundaries I would require if the conversation ever happened honestly. Time limits, written agreements, financial responsibilities, private discussion first. I opened a note on my phone and listed details like armor. And then I did the hardest part. I planned how to look my kids in the eyes afterward. How do you tell children that love can be manipulative? That adults can use family as a weapon? That surprises can be traps? You don't dump the whole truth on them. You don't make them pick sides. You give them something clear and safe. Mom gets to choose what happens to her, and you get to choose what happens to you. Wednesday, Mark continued performing. He asked what my favorite song was while we cooked, as if he might play it at dinner. He suggested we take a family photo soon. He kept touching my arm, my shoulder, my back, little contact points meant to calm me, to keep me soft. And every time he did, I felt the contrast so sharply it almost made me dizzy. Affection versus performance. Love versus leverage. Thursday, Linda called again. "Hi, honey," she said, breathless with excitement she didn't name. "Are you free Tuesday evening? I know you are," Mark told me, "but I just wanted to hear it from you." My grip tightened around the phone. She wanted me to confirm my own ambush, like consent after the fact. "I'm free," I said. "Oh, good," she chirped. "We're doing a little family dinner, nothing big, just something special." Special, another word that meant behave. Before we hung up, she added casually, "Make sure you wear something nice, for pictures." Pictures, there it was. The reason it had to be public. The reason I had to look beautiful. The reason my no would be inconvenient. After the call, Mark walked into the kitchen and said, "Everything okay?" I looked at him, this man who could be so good when he wanted, who could also disappear behind his mother's shadow, and I felt the weight of the days pressing toward Tuesday like a train. "I'm fine," I said, because the truth wouldn't help me yet. That night, the invitation finally arrived. No longer a placeholder, no longer a hint, but a confirmation that made my pulse kick hard. Mark sent it through the family group text, like a cheerful announcement. Tuesday, 7 p.m., Bistro Marlowe, private room, can't wait, red heart. The list of relatives chimed in instantly with excited replies, champagne emojis. "So proud of you." And she deserves this. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Private room, everyone invited, phones ready. A scripted celebration with me at the center, expected to shine and nod and say yes. My throat tightened, but my hands didn't shake this time. Because now I knew for sure. The ambush wasn't going to happen in my home, where I could step away and breathe. It was going to happen in public, where applause can be used like a cage. Bistro Marlowe smelled like polished wood and perfume, the kind of place where people speak softer because the prices are loud. Mark held the door for me like a gentleman in a movie, his palm at the small of my back, guiding me forward as if we were walking into something romantic instead of something staged. I wore the blue dress. Not because Linda chose it, not because I wanted her approval, because my daughter had looked at that garment bag like it contained magic, and I refused to punish my children for the adults' games. If there were pictures tonight, I wanted my kids to see their mother steady, no matter what happened behind the smile. The hostess led us toward the private room, and with every step my stomach tightened. I could already hear voices through the door. Too many, too bright, the kind of laughter that comes when people are excited to watch something unfold. When the door opened, applause hit me like a wall. "Surprise!" someone shouted, and the room erupted, hands clapping, chairs scraping, phones lifting in unison like a flock of metallic birds. The sound was so sudden and so loud my body flinched before my face could catch up. My kids ran ahead of me, grinning, their cheeks pink with pride. "Mom!" my daughter squealed like she'd done it, like she'd built this moment with glue and crayons. My son pumped his fist and yelled, "She's here." I smiled because they were looking at me. Around them, Mark's family formed a semicircle, his sisters in glittery tops, his cousins holding wine glasses. His aunt already crying like this was an award ceremony. Linda stood at the front, perfectly composed, hands clasped like a pastor about to bless the room. And there it was, the stage, the audience, the lighting, the script. "Wow," I managed, keeping my voice light. "This is a lot." Linda glided toward me and pulled me into a hug that was too firm to be affectionate. "Happy surprise night, honey," she whispered into my ear, and the words carried a warning wrapped in sugar. Her perfume filled my nose. Her grip tightened once, like punctuation. Then she released me and turned to the room. "Isn't she stunning?" Linda announced, and everyone cheered again. My cheeks warmed, not from pride, from being displayed. I looked for Mark. He stood near the back, hands in his pockets, wearing the smile he used when he wanted everyone to believe he was a good man. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. He watched the table, the wall, anything but me. Coward, a part of me thought, quiet and sharp. But another part of me, older, tired, thought, he's scared. And scared men hand their wives over to stronger women. The dinner began like a normal celebration, which was almost worse. There was bread that came in a warm basket, water glasses refilled before they were empty, waiters moving like shadows. People asked me about work, about the kids, about how I do it all, and I answered politely, hearing the hollowness in the praise. Because praise can be a leash too. Linda sat at the head of the table like she owned the room. She kept touching my hand, brief, public touches, every time someone complimented me, like she was claiming credit for my existence. "Tell them," she urged once, smiling wide. "Tell them how much you appreciate family." I took a sip of water and said, "I do appreciate support," careful with every word. My daughter sat beside me, swinging her legs under the chair, eyes darting from face to face. My son sat across, vibrating. He was waiting. He thought the surprise was still coming, something fun and bright, something that would make me happy cry. Halfway through the entrees, Linda clinked her spoon against her glass. The room fell into expectant hush immediately, like they'd rehearsed even that. "Everyone," she said, voice sweet and steady, "thank you for coming tonight. I know it's a weeknight, but some moments are too important to wait for a weekend." My stomach dropped, too important, too public. Linda turned toward me, her smile widening. "We're here to celebrate someone who gives and gives and gives, a mother, a wife, a woman who holds her family together." People nodded and murmured approval. Someone said, "Amen." Linda continued, and as she spoke, I watched the phones rise higher. My sister-in-law angled hers for the best shot. My aunt-in-law wiped her eyes. My cousin leaned forward, hungry for the reveal. "Sometimes," Linda said, "the people who give the most are the last to accept help. They think they have to do everything alone." She tilted her head, pitying. "But family doesn't let family struggle in silence." I could feel the trap tightening. Help, struggle, silence. The narrative was being built around me like a cage. I am overwhelmed, therefore I must accept whatever they offer, therefore my consent is selfish if it disrupts their story. Linda lifted a hand toward Mark. "And my son, sweet Mark, has been so worried about you." Mark's face twitched. He still didn't look at me. Linda's gaze returned to me. "So we decided to do something big, something meaningful, something that will change everything." The room held its breath. My daughter's hand squeezed my arm, thrilled. Linda gestured toward the door, and a waiter rolled in a cart with a covered platter. For a split second, absurdly, I thought it might be a cake. Then Linda said, "Not a dessert, honey, something better." She lifted the cover. Under it were papers, a neat stack of documents in a folder, topped with a ribbon so red it looked like a wound. I didn't move. The room erupted into excited murmurs. Someone laughed. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Linda picked up the folder and held it up like a trophy. "This," she announced, "is my lease termination paperwork and the new arrangement." Arrangement, not request. Arrangement meant done. She set the folder in front of me, right beside my plate, as if it belonged there as naturally as silverware. My daughter leaned in, eyes wide. "Mom," she whispered, "it's happening." I glanced at her, and my heart clenched so tight it hurt. She had no idea what it really meant. She just knew she'd been promised a happy ending. Linda's voice grew softer, more intimate, like she was doing me a favor. "I've been having such a hard time on my own," she said. "The stairs, the loneliness, and you know my lease is up. So Mark and I talked, and we realized the best thing for all of us is for me to move in with you." There it was, spoken aloud, in front of everyone, with applause already cued. A cheer went up instantly. "Oh, that's perfect," one sister squealed. "The kids will love it," another cousin chimed. Linda's friends, people I barely knew, smiled like they'd just watched something heartwarming. Phones kept recording. My body went cold. I could hear my pulse in my ears, louder than the room. This was the moment they designed. My children glowing, the family watching, Linda smiling like a queen, Mark hiding, and me expected to perform gratitude. Linda leaned closer, putting on the tender voice she used when she wanted to sound helpless. "Just for a little while," she said, "until I get settled, and we'll make it so easy. I'll help with the kids, I'll cook, I heard myself ask, almost calmly, "When did you decide this?" A flicker crossed Linda's face, surprised that I spoke at all. Then she laughed lightly. "Oh, honey, don't get stuck in details. We're here to celebrate. This is a blessing." A blessing. Another word that meant, don't resist. Someone at the end of the table called out, "Say yes." Another voice, "Come on, she deserves support." My son grinned at me from across the table, unaware, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Mom, you have to." The room laughed like it was cute. My throat tightened. I wanted to reach across the table and scoop him up and carry him out, away from this, away from adult manipulation dressed as family fun. Linda slid the folder closer to my hand. "All you have to do is agree," she said brightly, and then, with theatrical sweetness, she added, "We already set up the downstairs room. Isn't that thoughtful?" Already set up. They had moved my house around without me. They had rearranged my life like furniture. My fingers hovered above the folder, and I felt every eye in the room lock onto my hand. This was where the script expected me to touch it, to accept, to smile. If I said yes, I would disappear a little more. My home would become Linda's domain. My marriage would become a triangle. My children would learn that family means you don't get to say no. If I said no, I would become the villain in high definition. Ungrateful, cold, dramatic. The woman who embarrassed her husband and broke her mother-in-law's heart in front of the kids. I looked at Mark again, finally, forcing the connection. He gave me one quick glance, pleading, panicked, and then looked away. He was asking me to save him, to take the hit, to keep the peace he'd sold me for. Linda's smile held steady, but her eyes sharpened like a blade. "Well," she prompted, voice light enough for the room but heavy enough for me, "aren't you excited?" I took a breath so deep my ribs ached. I tasted wine and fear and something else, resolve. Then I did the one thing they didn't plan for. I didn't pick up the folder. I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I didn't explode. I paused, long enough for the applause to die in people's hands, and I let the silence become mine. Silence is a strange weapon. It doesn't look like anything, but it changes the shape of a room. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Phones hovered midair. Forks paused above plates. Even the waiters seemed to freeze at the doorway like they'd sensed something sacred or dangerous was about to happen. Linda's smile stayed on her face, but it tightened at the corners. Mark's sisters shifted in their seats, glancing at each other like, why isn't she reacting right? My daughter watched me with shining eyes that slowly started to dim, confusion creeping in. My son looked back and forth between me and Linda like he was watching a tennis match. This was the moment they had built for. My big grateful yes, wrapped in applause. The script was sitting right there, red ribbon and all. And I was not reading my lines. I set my napkin on the table carefully, like I had all the time in the world. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me the most. My body had been living in dread for days, but now that the trap had finally snapped shut, something in me went still. Calm isn't always peace. Sometimes it's survival. I looked at Linda first, not because she deserved the honor, but because she was the one who thought she owned the room. Then I looked around, at the faces, the smiles, the phones, and I spoke loudly enough that everyone could hear. Can I ask one question? Linda's smile widened, eager. Of course, honey, ask anything. Her tone said, see, I'm generous, I'm reasonable. She wanted to make me look childish before I even opened my mouth. I nodded once. When did I agree to this? The words dropped into the room, like a stone into water. A couple of people laughed reflexively, like my question was a joke. Linda's sisters chuckled. Someone said, oh, come on. Linda blinked. Sweetheart. No, I said gently, and that single syllable changed something. Because I didn't say it with anger. I didn't say it with tears. I said it like a fact, like a boundary you can't negotiate. When, I repeated, still calm, did I agree that you move into our home? A pulse of discomfort ran through the table. It was subtle, chairs creaking, a cough, a fork clinking too hard against a plate. Discomfort is what happens when the truth shows up where people wanted a performance. Linda let out a light laugh, the kind she used when she wanted to make something serious sound silly. Oh, honey, don't be like that. It's not about agreements. It's about family helping family. I tilted my head. Family can help each other with consent. My voice didn't rise. That was the key. If I stayed level, they couldn't paint me as hysterical. They couldn't hide behind she's overreacting. Calm is harder to dismiss. Linda's smile wavered. Consent, she echoed, like the word was dramatic. Yes, I said. Consent, because moving someone into your home isn't a surprise, it's a decision. My daughter's face tightened. She stared at me like she was trying to translate what I meant into something she understood. My heart twisted, and I reached under the table to squeeze her hand. It's okay, I whispered to her just for her, so she wouldn't feel the room crack. Someone at the far end of the table, Mark's aunt, cleared her throat and said, well, it's just Linda. She's family. And I love that she's family, I replied, turning my gaze to the aunt, keeping it warm. But being family doesn't mean you get to make choices for other people. Linda's voice sharpened, still coated in sweetness. No one is making choices for you. We're offering you support. I let that sit for a beat, then asked the question I'd practiced in my head 100 times. Then why does my yes need an audience? The room went quieter than it had any right to be in a restaurant. Even the clink of dishes in the hallway sounded far away, like we'd been sealed in glass. Linda's eyes flashed. Mark's sister stopped recording for the first time all night. I continued steady. If this is truly about helping me, why couldn't Mark and I discuss it privately? Why couldn't you ask me at home? Why does it have to be in a private room with cameras and applause? Mark shifted in his chair like my words were heat under him. He swallowed hard, still didn't look at me. Linda opened her mouth, then closed it. She tried again, softer. Because it's a celebration, honey. It feels like pressure, I said simply. A gasp, faint but audible, from one of the cousins. The word pressure is a mirror. People don't like seeing themselves in it. Linda's smile broke for half a second, and in that crack I saw the real thing underneath. Control. Mark finally spoke, voice too cheerful. Baby, come on, it's not like that. Mom she needs help and we thought this would be good, for everyone. For everyone, I echoed. I kept my eyes on him now because he was the hinge. Mark, I said, still calm. Did we talk about this together? Or did you talk about it with your mom and then decide I'd be okay with it? His face flushed. He laughed once weakly. We discussed possibilities. Possibilities, I repeated. And did we agree? He stared down at his plate, like answers might be written there. Linda jumped in quickly, voice louder, trying to reclaim the room. This is turning into something it doesn't need to be. That line was an old one, the family's favorite. It meant, stop making us feel uncomfortable. Stop making us look bad. Stop asking for respect in public. I inhaled slowly and looked around the table again. I'm not trying to ruin dinner, I said. I'm trying to make one thing clear. A surprise is something you can say no to without being punished. My son frowned. Punished, he repeated, and my chest tightened. He didn't understand. Thank God he didn't understand. I leaned toward him, softening my voice. Buddy, you didn't do anything wrong, okay? Grandma and Dad planned something. You were excited. That's okay. His eyes searched mine, anxious now, like he'd just realized he might have stepped into something sharp. Linda swooped immediately. Oh, don't upset him, she scolded me, as if I'd hurt my child by telling the truth. See what you're doing? You're making the kids nervous. That was Linda's move. Use my love for my children as a leash. I didn't bite. I'm not upsetting him, I said, still gentle. The situation is upsetting, and the kids are nervous because they were put in the middle. A few heads turned toward Linda. One of Mark's sisters blinked quickly, like she'd been slapped by a sentence. Linda's lips pressed together. No one put them in the middle. They were helping. They were recruited, I said, and the word came out quieter, heavier. And I'm not mad at them. I'm mad at the adults who thought using the kids would guarantee my yes. Mark's sister snapped. That's not fair. I nodded. Maybe it isn't fair, but it's true. Someone, Mark's cousin, the one who'd been silent all night, murmured. She has a point. Linda's head whipped toward him. Her smile returned with force, but it didn't reach her eyes. Excuse me. He shrank back, and I watched the power dynamic shift in real time. People weren't just watching my answer. They were watching who was allowed to speak. Linda turned back to me, voice dripping concern. Honey, you've been stressed. You're taking this the wrong way. We're doing this because we love you. There it was, the weaponized concern. If I resisted, it wasn't because I had a valid boundary. It was because I was unwell. I didn't argue. I just asked the question that mattered most, the one I'd been avoiding because I already knew the answer. What happens if I say no? I asked, looking directly at Linda. Right now, in this room, what happens? The silence that followed was louder than the applause had been. Linda's throat bobbed. She glanced around as if searching for a lifeline. Mark's sisters stared at their plates, phones lowered all the way to the table. And in that silence, the truth stood up on its own. If I said no, they would punish me socially. They would shame me. They would call me selfish and difficult and ungrateful. They would make me the villain to protect the fantasy that they were loving. Linda finally answered, voice clipped. It would be disappointing. I smiled faintly, not because it was funny, but because she'd admitted it. Disappointing to who? I asked. To you, or to the version of me you need to keep this easy. Linda's face hardened. Her sweetness slipped, just a fraction, and I saw the real Linda, the woman who believed tradition meant authority. Mark's aunt jumped in, exasperated. This is ridiculous. She's offering to help. People would kill to have a mother-in-law who wants to support. And people would kill to have a husband who protects their boundaries, I said softly, without venom. Mark flinched. The room split, right there, like wood cracking under pressure. Some faces tightened into judgment, people who believed family meant obedience. Others looked uncertain, as if they'd never considered that help could be coercion. One of Mark's sisters scoffed. So what, you're just going to say no and embarrass everyone? That was it, the real fear. Not my well-being, not Linda's safety, embarrassment, image. I nodded slowly. I'm not here to embarrass anyone, I said. I'm here to say I'm not agreeing to a major decision in front of an audience, not tonight. Linda leaned forward, voice low and sharp now, aimed like a needle. So you're saying no? I'm saying not like this, I corrected. If you want to talk about living arrangements, we can discuss it privately, me and Mark, at home, without the kids, without cameras, without pressure. Mark's mouth opened, closed. He looked like a man watching his easy exit disappear. Linda's hands tightened around her water glass. After everything I've done, she began, the guilt rising like a tide. I lifted a hand, calm. I'm not debating your love, I'm debating your method. My daughter squeezed my hand under the table, tiny and trembling. I turned to her, kissed her knuckles, and whispered, "You're okay." Then I looked back up at the table full of faces and said clearly, "I love our family, but love doesn't require me to surrender my voice." And for the first time all night, Mark looked at me, really looked. In his eyes, I saw fear, yes, but also something else. Recognition. Like he'd just realized I wasn't going to save him by sacrificing myself. The room was no longer one team. It was two. Some people saw a mother standing up for consent. Others saw a woman refusing to perform. And the ones who wanted control the most were about to fight hardest to get it back. The room didn't explode all at once. It cracked. For a heartbeat after my last sentence, nobody moved. It was like the whole family had to update their internal script in real time, and the loading screen was awkward silence. Then the noises started again, small at first. A chair scraping, a cough that sounded too loud, someone exhaling sharply like I'd personally offended their lungs. Linda blinked slowly, then turned her head toward Mark's sisters with a look that said, "Can you believe her?" It was a silent rallying cry. And it worked, because this family didn't run on logic. It ran on loyalty to the loudest person. Mark's oldest sister, the one who loved to call herself honest, snorted. "Wow," she said, leaning back like she was settling in for entertainment. "So we're doing this now." "We're doing what?" I asked, still calm, though my pulse was hammering. "Talking like adults." She rolled her eyes. "You're making a scene, that's what you're doing." A scene, as if my refusal was the problem, not the ambush. Linda's mouth tightened into a line. "I can't believe you," she said softly, and the softness was the point. She wanted the room to hear pain, not control. After all this planning, after all the love. Mark's aunt shook her head. "This is why surprises aren't worth it," she muttered, but she didn't mean the ambush. She meant my response. Mark finally found his voice, and it came out panicked. Okay, let's take a breath. Everyone calm down." He looked at me like I was the one holding a match. My son's eyes were wide now, the grin gone, replaced by confusion so raw it made my throat tighten. My daughter stared at the papers on the table like they were suddenly something dangerous. The kids were the only ones in the room not performing. That's when I knew exactly what mattered most. Not Linda's outrage, not Mark's embarrassment, not the relatives choosing sides like this was a sport. My children. I slid my chair back and stood, smooth and deliberate. The room tracked me like a spotlight. "Hey," I said gently, turning to the kids. "Can you two come with me for a second?" Linda's head snapped up. "Don't you dare take them out like you're punishing them." I kept my eyes on my kids. "I'm not punishing them." Mark's sister scoffed. "She's going to make them cry so she can look like the victim." I felt heat flash behind my eyes, but I swallowed it. Anger would feed them. Calm starved them. I crouched beside my daughter, bringing my face level with hers. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said softly. "You hear me? Nothing." Her lower lip trembled. "But Grandma said—" "I know what Grandma said," I interrupted gently. "But sometimes grown-ups make plans that aren't fair, and kids don't know that. You were trying to do something nice. I love you for that." My son whispered, "Are you mad?" I shook my head. "Not at you, never at you." I stood again, keeping my voice light enough that it didn't sound like a crisis. "We're going to step outside for a minute. We'll be right back." Linda leaned forward, eyes hard. "This is not how family handles things." I looked at her, still calm. "This is how I handle my kids' feelings. They didn't sign up for this." I took each child's hand, one on each side, and walked out of the private room. Behind me, I heard the family start talking all at once, voices overlapping like a swarm. Someone laughed nervously. Someone said my name with disgust. Someone else muttered, "She's unbelievable." But the second the door closed, the noise dulled, and for a moment it was just us, me and the two small people who mattered more than anyone's ego. The hallway outside the private room was dim and quiet. A waiter passed, eyes politely averted. I guided my kids to a little bench near the bathrooms and sat between them, still holding their hands. My daughter's eyes were glossy. "Mom," she whispered, "did I ruin it?" That question hit me like a punch. I pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "No, baby, you didn't ruin anything." "But everyone's mad," my son said, voice cracking. I took a breath. This was the moment I'd been planning for, the moment I promised myself I wouldn't fail. "Okay," I said softly. "Listen to me. There's a difference between a surprise and a trap." My son frowned. "A trap?" "Yeah," I said. "A surprise is something fun you give someone and they're allowed to like it or not like it. Like if you surprise me with a drawing, I can say, 'Oh, wow,' and love it. If you surprise me with a new food, I can try it. I still get to choose." My daughter sniffed, but Grandma said it was a surprise. "I know," I said, "but what Grandma planned wasn't something small. It was something that would change our house. And big changes need to be talked about first, not sprung on someone in front of everyone." My son's brow wrinkled hard, working. "So, Grandma tried to trick you." I chose my words carefully. I didn't want them to hate their grandmother. I wanted them to understand boundaries. "Grandma wanted something," I said. "And instead of asking me privately, she tried to make it hard for me to say no by doing it in public. That's not fair, and it's not your fault." My daughter whispered, "Is Grandma moving in?" I held her gaze. "Not right now. Not because someone surprised me. If anything like that ever happens, it will happen because Mom and Dad talk about it first and decide together." My son looked relieved for a second, then worried again. "Is Dad mad at you?" I swallowed. "Dad is stressed," I said honestly, "but Dad and I are going to talk." My daughter's voice went tiny. "Are you going to fight?" I exhaled slowly. "We might have a hard conversation, but you're safe, and we both love you." They leaned into me then, both of them, like little planets pulling toward gravity. I hugged them tight, and I let myself feel the heartbreak of it. They were supposed to be eating dessert right now, giggling, feeling proud. Instead, they were learning an early lesson about adults and pressure. Inside the room, a loud laugh burst out, someone forcing humor into discomfort. It sounded like Mark's sister. Then Linda's voice cut through, sharp even through the door. "She's humiliating me," Linda said. I closed my eyes. That was her focus. Not the kids' confusion, not the disrespect. Humiliation. Image over integrity. I kissed my daughter's hair again. "Okay," I whispered. "We're going to go back in for 1 minute and then we're leaving. You don't have to say anything, you just stay close to me." My son nodded, jaw tight like he was trying to be brave. When we walked back into the private room, the conversation stopped mid-sentence like someone hit pause. Every face turned toward us. Phones had been lowered but not put away. Eyes were bright with judgment. Mark looked like he'd been sweating. Linda sat upright, hands folded, expression wounded. I guided the kids back to their seats, then stood behind my chair instead of sitting. That small choice felt powerful. It told my body, "You're not trapped here." "We're going home," I said simply. Mark's head snapped up. "What, babe, come on." "I'm not staying," I replied. I kept my voice even for the kids. "This isn't a safe environment for them right now." Linda scoffed. "Safe, don't be dramatic." I looked at her. "The kids are confused and upset. That's enough reason." Mark's sister muttered, "Unbelievable," under her breath. Linda leaned forward, voice trembling with indignation. "So you're going to punish all of us because you're sensitive, because you can't take a kind gesture." I didn't take the bait. A kind gesture doesn't require a public yes. Mark finally stood, trying to control the damage. "Let's talk outside," he said, voice low. I nodded once. "Yes, outside, after we leave." Linda's eyes narrowed. "If you walk out, don't expect me to." "To what?" I asked gently. "Approve of me." The room went silent again. A cousin stared at their napkin. Mark's aunt blinked like she'd never heard someone speak to Linda like that. I turned to my kids. "Coats," I said softly. My daughter stood instantly, obedient, still shaken. My son hesitated, glancing at Mark. Mark's face crumpled for a moment. "Buddy," he said, forcing calm, "go with Mom." My son slid off his chair and came to me. I took his hand again. We walked out of the private room with the weight of everyone's eyes on our backs. In the hallway, Mark followed, faster, his shoes tapping like he was trying to catch up to his own choices. "Why did you do that?" he hissed as soon as we were far enough away that the family couldn't hear. I kept my voice low and steady. "Why did you let it happen?" He rubbed his face. "Because my mom needs help, because it's temporary, because you always—" He stopped himself, and his eyes flashed with the truth he almost said. "You always make it work." I nodded slowly. "You're right, I always make it work, and that's why you thought you could do this to me." Mark's mouth opened, closed. He looked like a man standing on ice that had just cracked. Behind us, the private room door opened, and Linda's voice spilled into the hallway, sharp and furious. "Mark, get back in here." Mark flinched like her voice was a leash. I tightened my grip on my kid's hands. "We're leaving," I told him, calm as a bell. "You can come with us, or you can stay and manage your mother's feelings. But tonight, I'm managing our kids." His eyes flicked toward the door, then back to me. Panic versus choice. Peacekeeping versus parenting. He followed us. In the parking lot, the cold air hit my face like a slap, and for the first time all night I could breathe. The kids climbed into the back seat silently. My daughter buckled herself with shaking hands. My son stared out the window. Mark got into the passenger seat and just sat there, staring ahead as if the world had changed shape and he didn't recognize it. I started the car and pulled out slowly, my heart heavy but steady. As we drove, my daughter whispered from the back, "Mom." "Yes, baby." "Are we bad?" I felt my throat tighten again, and I forced my voice to stay gentle. "No," I said. "We're not bad, we're brave." Silence filled the car after that, thick and trembling. And somewhere inside me, beneath the adrenaline, another truth rose, quiet but undeniable. Dismantling the surprise was only the first battle, because traps don't disappear just because you step out of one. They rebuild. They adjust. And now I had to decide what this meant long-term, because patterns don't change from one brave moment alone. The next morning, our house felt quieter, not peaceful, quiet the way a room feels after something breaks. The kids padded down the hallway like they were afraid of making noise. Mark moved like a man carrying a heavy bag he didn't want to admit was his. I made pancakes anyway. Not because everything was fine. Because routines are a kind of safety net for children, and my kids needed something solid under their feet. The batter sizzled on the griddle. The smell of vanilla filled the kitchen. Normal tried its best to return. My daughter sat at the counter, chin in her hands, staring at the table like she expected the night before to crawl back out of it. My son poked at his pancake with a fork and didn't eat. Mark leaned against the fridge, phone face down, jaw tight. Finally, my daughter whispered, "Is Grandma mad at me?" My chest tightened. "No," I said immediately. "Grandma is upset about what happened, but you didn't do anything wrong." My son's voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Are we still going to see her?" "We will," I said, careful, "but not until everyone can be kind and respectful. And that's the grown-up's job, not yours." They both looked at me like I'd spoken a new language. Because in our family, respect had always meant obeying Linda. It had never meant honoring the person in front of you. I slid the pancakes onto plates and sat down across from them. Mark remained standing, hovering, like he wasn't sure if he belonged at the table. "Okay," I said softly. "We're going to talk about last night, not to scare you, to make sure you understand something important." My daughter's eyes went wide. My son swallowed. I took a breath and kept my voice warm. A surprise is supposed to be something fun, something that makes you smile, and you're still allowed to say no to it. My son frowned. "Like if you surprise me with broccoli." I almost smiled. "Exactly, you can try it, you can say no thank you, and you're not a bad kid." My daughter frowned hard. "But Grandma said you had to say yes or people would be sad." I nodded slowly, and that's the part that wasn't okay. Mark's shoulders tensed. He stared at the floor. "There's a difference," I continued, "between making someone happy and pressuring them." My son's brow creased. "Pressure is like pushing." "Yes," I said, "like pushing someone into something they didn't choose." My daughter's voice trembled. "Did Grandma push you?" I chose honesty without cruelty. "Grandma tried to, and Dad helped her. Not because you guys are bad, not because Dad doesn't love me, but because sometimes grown-ups avoid hard conversations and they think a big moment will solve everything." Mark flinched at that, but he didn't interrupt. I leaned forward. "Here, what I want you to remember, your feelings matter, your choices matter, and my choices matter too. Love should feel safe. Love should not feel like a corner." My daughter whispered, "So Grandma cornered you?" "Yes," I said softly, "and you didn't know, that's why you're not in trouble." My son finally ate a bite of pancake, like my words gave him permission to exist again. Mark cleared his throat, voice rough. "Kids," he said, "I'm sorry." They looked up at him, surprised. He sat down slowly, like he was stepping onto ice. "I thought I was helping," he admitted. "I thought if it happened in a happy way, it would be easier." My daughter blinked. "Easier for who?" The question landed hard, because it was the exact question I'd started asking. Mark's face reddened. He looked at me, then back at the kids. "Easier for everyone," he said weakly. My son didn't let him off, but it wasn't easier for Mom. Mark's eyes glistened for a second, and I watched him confront a truth he'd been avoiding for years. When you keep peace by sacrificing someone else, it isn't peace. It's just quiet injustice. "You're right," he said, voice cracking. "It wasn't fair to Mom." The kids returned to their pancakes. It was a small moment, but it mattered. They'd heard their father name fairness out loud, and in this family, that was almost revolutionary. After breakfast, I took the kids to the park. I needed them to run, to laugh, to feel like the world wasn't collapsing just because adults had failed. Mark stayed home, saying he had something to handle. I didn't ask what. I didn't offer a script. When we came back, the house was still. Mark sat on the couch with his phone in his hand, the kind of posture that says, "I've been hit and I'm still counting the bruises." "She called," he said quietly. "Linda," I replied because we both knew. He nodded. "She's furious." I hung my keys on the hook and didn't take my coat off yet. I wanted to know what I was walking into. "What did she say?" I asked. Mark swallowed. "That you embarrassed her, that you turned the kids against her, that you're controlling me." I exhaled slowly. The words were so predictable they almost felt boring. Linda always framed boundaries as attacks. It was the only way she could keep power, make the other person look cruel for protecting themselves. "And what did you say?" I asked. Mark stared at the floor. "I told her she shouldn't have done it that way." My eyebrows lifted. "Shouldn't have done what?" He flinched. He knew what I meant. Specificity is accountability. He swallowed hard. "I told her she shouldn't have tried to move in without asking you." Silence stretched. "And," I prompted gently, "how did that go?" Mark let out a humorless laugh. "Not great." "Did you tell her she can't move in?" I asked. He hesitated, and that hesitation was a whole history. I nodded once. "Okay," I said, calm. "Then I'll say it clearly, and you can decide what kind of husband you want to be." Mark looked up, alarmed. "Linda is not moving into this house," I said. "Not because she's your mother, but because she tried to take my consent away. If we ever consider something like that in the future, it will be discussed privately with clear boundaries and it will be a mutual decision. But after last night, no. Mark opened his mouth, then closed it. His fear was almost visible, fear of his mother's wrath, fear of being the bad son, fear of conflict. And in that moment, the real choice stood between us, plain and sharp. Would he keep letting his mother run our marriage by proxy, or would he finally stand beside me? He rubbed his palms over his face. She's going to say I'm choosing you over her. You should, I replied. That's what marriage is, choosing your partner, protecting the family you built. Mark's eyes flicked toward the hallway where the kids' voices drifted from the living room, cartoons and giggles, innocent again. He swallowed. I don't want to lose my mom, he whispered. I softened my voice. Then don't, but you can't keep her by losing me. He stared at me like he'd never heard it put that way before, like he'd thought the cost of peace was always mine to pay. That afternoon, we sat at the kitchen table and wrote boundaries down, literally. Not because I needed paperwork to love him, but because our love had been operating on vague promises and hopes for too long. Vague is where Linda lived. Vague is where Mark hid. I needed clarity. No public pressure. No surprises that require agreement. No decisions about the home without both yeses. No involving the kids in adult agendas. If Linda needs help, we explore options. Assisted living, a ground floor apartment, financial planning, without sacrificing our household. Mark nodded through it, jaw tight. We should talk to a counselor, he said quietly, surprising me. I studied him. Are you saying that because you mean it, or because it sounds good? He met my eyes then, really met them. Because I mean it, he said. I don't want to keep doing this. It wasn't a perfect redemption. It wasn't a movie ending where a man becomes brave overnight. But it was the first honest sentence he'd said in a long time. Linda didn't take it quietly. She texted, she called, she sent paragraphs about betrayal and disrespect and everything she's sacrificed. She tried to recruit relatives to shame me into softness. Mark's sisters posted vague quotes online about ungrateful people who don't value family. The family group chat went cold, then hot, then toxic. And for the first time, I didn't scramble to fix it. I didn't beg people to understand me. I didn't write long explanations. I didn't perform emotional labor to manage the fallout of someone else's manipulation. I kept my life small and honest. I took my kids to school. I made dinner. I held them a little longer at bedtime. I told them in tiny ways that love does not require you to abandon yourself. A week later, my daughter came home with a drawing. It was 3 stick figures holding hands, me, her brother, under a crooked heart. She wrote in careful letters, Mom can say no. My eyes burned. I sat on the edge of her bed and said, Yes, baby, Mom can say no. She looked up at me and whispered, And I can too. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Yes, I said, you can too. That was the ending I wanted, not Linda's approval, not the family's applause, not even Mark's guilt. My children's understanding. Because that was the real inheritance in this story. Not a private room at a fancy restaurant, not a staged celebration, not a performance of gratitude. It was the lesson that dignity is not rude, boundaries are not cruelty, consent is not optional. And if someone calls it a surprise, but you're not allowed to say no, what is it really?